court storming. It's a tradition as old as, well, frankly, I don't know. But what I do know is that court storming has been around for a long time, and not just court storming, field storming as well, and ice storming. Just kidding. That'd probably be dangerous if you try to storm the ice. The point I'm trying to make here is that whenever a team does something incredible, they accomplish something really big. It's not uncommon for fans to storm the area, but perhaps for the first time in my life, now we're talking about actually potentially banning court storming, and we're going to find out why. You guys are going to find out why. I'm David Street, and this is Total Sports Talk. What's up, everybody? Once again, I am David Street, and this is my co-host Ed Smith.
Welcome, y'all.
So, in case you missed our last episode, folks, our other co-host Matthew Raridan is not here. Obviously, he's on vacation with his wife. He's going to be gone all week, but he'll be back next week. But this week, it's just me and Ed. So, court storming, Ed. As I said in our intro, for the first time, at least in my life, we're talking about potentially banning it. And why are we talking about banning it? Well, because in case folks were living under a rock, between Wake Forest and Duke, Wake Forest pulled off a massive upset. Wake Forest fans stormed the court, understandably so, because it was a huge victory for them. But in the process, Kyle Filipowski got injured. Luckily, he wasn't too hurt, but he was kind of roughed up nonetheless. And Ed, what do you what do you think? What do you think here?
Well, I don't think that it's really going to be an issue that anybody talks about if it's not Filipowski. Filipowski's been a cornerstone of Duke basketball this year, averaging 15 points and 9 rebounds a game. No, if it wasn't for the fact that it was him, it wouldn't be an issue whatsoever. And it did turn out that he was just sore from having knee to knee contact with the fan that rushed the court on him, and he winds up being sore with no major injury. However, the genie's out of the bottle at this point. Everybody that has a Twitter account, including us, we're talking about this, and it's something that has been done since college athletics became a thing, because college athletics has such a passion that their kids watching kids play the game, and they want to enjoy in the victory of something surprising, something monumental, something big. Well, that's what the court storming is about. Has there been some issues along the way? Sure. I mean, when you get that kind of mass of people around each other, there's there's gonna bound to be some issues along the way. But here in the past couple of years, there's been more scrutiny on it, as there's been higher profiles, there's been more money in the players' hands, and let's not disavow the biggest elephant in the room. There's gambling involved. So when we start talking about injuries that happen in things other than the game itself, that's when things start going bonkers. But David, I want to ask you, what is it that you think should have occurred in this particular instance, and should it be carried over or adjusted in some way?
So I'm going to address something first, and then I promise I will answer your question. And who knows? Maybe the first thing I say does answer your question in a way. But when I see people on Twitter talking about banning court storming, let's be honest here, it's not going to happen because when it comes to college sports fans, rules be damned. There's a reason, and the example I'm about to give, not exactly the same thing. It's sort of a different topic, but the same general principle applies. There's a reason why every single year the football game between Tennessee and Alabama, why either Alabama or Tennessee self reports itself to the NCAA when they smoke cigars after the game, right? Clearly, it's against the rules, but they know that there's nothing they can do about it. So the schools just self report themselves. All right, you can quote unquote ban court storming, but do you think fans are going to follow it? No, absolutely not. And then Ed, can you ask your question again?
I was asking if you would keep it as it is, or would there be some tweaks that you could suggest along the way?
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that I'm being accurate here. So I do think after what happened, I don't think you can do nothing. Um, someone I don't remember who it was, but someone offered what I thought was the best suggestion, and that was give a 20-second a 20-second clock, and the clock goes down, then the fans can storm the court. And then also, I think you asked about this as well, like what could have Wake Forest done better? Well, certainly they could have prepared themselves better because you always have to anticipate that an upset is going to happen because upsets, especially in college basketball, they happen all of the time, right? Even if you think the likelihood of that team pulling off an upset is very low, well, guess what? It's never going to be zero. Okay, there's a reason why in games, why even heavy underdogs, why they don't have a 0% chance to win. Okay, they always have a chance to win. There's a reason why it's never at 0%. And Wake Forest certainly does hold partial responsibility for not preparing for the outcome that we all saw.
Yeah, and when you're having that rush of emotion with college kids, they are just gonna, as you said, rules be damned uh, when it comes to that. So they're going to, you know, fulfill their excitement by, banding together in a large party. Let's
Hmm.
call it what it is. It's a large party that is spontaneous, happening in the middle of the court, and everybody's invited. That's just what it is. As much as the administrators try and look after rules of court storming, they have tried certain things like finding the organization, the school that hosted this court storming or football field storming, uh, because it happens in both. It
Hmm.
doesn't happen in hockey, as you mentioned. So, with that Tennessee Alabama upset that happened a couple years ago, Tennessee only got fined $100,000. That's not going to deter the entirety of that stadium getting down the field, pulling a goalpost down, ripping it down, taking it through the hallway, and throwing it in the Tennessee River. That
Yeah.
is $1 per person to be able to have that privilege. I don't think anybody there, by the time they've paid their drinks, concessions, seats, parking, all that stuff, they're going to worry about $1 extra to be able to rip down the goalpost after an upset of Alabama and throw the goalpost into the river. Now, if there's something that I would suggest as a practice, not necessarily something that can be, I would say, regulated, so to speak, but a practice for the road team is if there is a court storming situation, get off the court where you are,
Hmm.
because all these students are going to the center of the floor onto the court where you're trying to walk over to your bench. Just get off the court, period. And you avoid all of this. Just kind of stand there, let them storm the court because it doesn't take but
Mm-hmm.
15, 20 seconds for them to make it there. And then you go about your business, go around the court, go into your locker room, and call it a night. I
Mm-hmm.
know it's not the immediacy of going back to where your coaches are, but that's what security guards are should be there for. The security is there for the safety of everybody, and if there's a way to do it responsibly, I think this is a way that you could do it responsibly. It is up to them to make that happen. So let the security guards take these players around the chaos and still get back to the locker rooms where they need to be instead of letting the road team players just kind of mosey along because yes, it's an emotional game. They're kind of upset. They want to get over to their team and back to their brothers or sisters. You know, first thing they want, but that's not the best thing for them in that kind of mass of humanity.
Mm-hmm. Well, listen, I've seen lots of takes regarding what to do with court storming. Some, in my opinion, more agreeable, some more disagreeable. But there is one truly, truly awful take that I saw someone who has a really big following. Did you see what Jay Billis had to say about the situation?
Oh, oh, you know, there's been a few things that Jay Billis has said in the past couple of weeks that I just can't, I just can't with him.
It
You know, but
with Jay,
between this and the expansion of March Madness, I
yeah,
just,
with with Jay Billis, man, it's like in my opinion, he says some things that I think are highly intelligent. I agree with him 100%.
yeah.
But then he says other things where I'm just like this dude right here, you know? Like, listen, how on earth can you, as a member of the media, with the kind of reach that you have, even think it's remotely okay to arrest people for court storming? I'm not saying that there shouldn't be any punishment. Like if you wanna I don't know, if you wanna address a game ban or a multi game ban, okay, like whatever. But there is such a thing as going the extreme length. And leave it to Jay Billis to go the extreme length here.
Well, let's also keep in mind who Jay Billis works for. They are all about going to the extreme length that is the the place that doesn't make any common sense whatsoever. You know, he's talking about, you know, having people arrested. How about you just suspend their next game?
Yeah,
You know, that
exactly.
particular fan, suspend them for the next game. Don't let them into the next game and let other fans come in that would be a little more docile, if you will.
Hmm.
You know, if you want to go that route. I think
Yeah,
it's great for the excitement of the game because part of college basketball is the crowd being right there on top of you. If you've ever seen Cameron Indoor Arena, there is not much space between you and the fans. There is
yeah.
none. So having them on top of you, basically, jumping, screaming, yelling, you know, just ready to get after you in every single point of the game, that's part of it. So
Yeah.
you're not going to better the product of college basketball by taking out the fans that are the most passionate, and those are the ones that are storming the court to be part of the celebration of a big win.
Well, and for the sake of argument, okay, let's say that Jay Billis's idea isn't crazy. All right, who are you going to arrest? Are you going to arrest everybody? And if you are somehow, pro this asinine take, you might say, "Oh, well, it's just about setting an example." Okay, but then again, like, which one are you going to arrest? Because if you arrest that person for court storming, he or she is going to be like, "Well, why didn't you arrest those guys?" Like, you see what I mean? It's an ass all around.
100%. You know, arrest Jay Billis for thought police. Yeah, let the thought police arrest him for being a complete moron with his take on that.
Exactly. Well, speaking of asinine, Ed, why don't we talk about that asinine no call in the game, the NBA game between the Knicks and the Pistons?
Yeah, that was definitely a situation in which you know the Pistons, for as bad as they are, they're
Hmm.
not catching any breaks, and that's part of being a bad basketball team. You're not going to
Yeah.
catch breaks. But this was such an egregious no call that even the head of officiating said, we screwed up. That
Whoop.
whoops.
Sorry.
I don't know. Yeah. So Monty Williams, the head coach of the 8-win team Pistons, which
Yeah.
is still one less than the NBA record for futility in a season,
Yeah.
goes on this huge tirade against the referees, saying that, oh, this is the most egregious thing that we've ever seen. My guys are trying to come up to me and ask, what what do we do, coach? How do we get past this? Because there's only so many letters you can write to the league office. There's only so many protests that you can have. There's only so many times where you can go out into the media and then get fined for it.
Yeah.
It's not doing anything. But let me ask you, David, is there an accountability that you know of that NBA refs have ever had on bad calls, no calls, or just overall mismanagement of the game?
Well, you're asking me about accountability when it comes to NBA refs, when you should be asking if there's any accountability when it comes to refs, period, in any sport, in any league. There is none. In fact, and I'm fairly certain we've talked about this before, Ed, I can't think of any other group, okay? And when I say any other group, I just mean any profession, sports or non sports. I cannot think of any other group that does not get held accountable when they clearly need to be held accountable. It's insane.
It is insane. And we're also talking about a sport that you could find yourself in the middle of a 10-minute stretch where they
Hmm.
have to go back to the replay and look over a certain amount of plays in the second quarter that extend the time of the game by 20 minutes for no reason whatsoever. Is it this kind of foul? Is it this kind of foul? Is it shooting foul? Is it take foul? Is it leave all that stuff out? Get the calls right. I am all for getting calls right, 100%. But you know what happens over the course of a season? Bad calls, good calls tend to
Hmm.
even themselves out.
True.
So that in and of itself, for a team, should not make that big of a difference. But as I mentioned before, you've you've got to have the regular season be almost perfect because of the amount of money being gambled on, because there's money changing hands,
Yeah.
because you're not going to have the same person putting the same amount of money on the money line for the Knicks night after night, night after night after night. That's not going to happen that way. So they want to make sure that everything is to perfection. Well, in this case, perfect is the enemy of good, and it is ruining the ability to watch NBA basketball because of, I don't want to be watching a ball game and
Mhm.
have that awkward camera angle where I'm counting nose hairs on the referee every
Mhm.
5 minutes because they're trying to look up something on a monitor and have a discussion and look it back up and have a discussion and look it back up, then tell the people at the scorer's table, then hold up the hand and give the ball to the player on the end line and say, okay, now we can resume play. It's just so difficult to get in a rhythm of watching NBA basketball right now when it's being so tic tac over trying to be perfect. And that's why perfect is the enemy of good in this situation. I do have ideas, but I wanted to hear your thoughts on it.
Well, I have thoughts. regarding the foul itself. So when I look at it, that was clearly a foul. But I also don't think there was malicious intent on DiVincenzo's part. Do you agree with me there?
I don't think there was malicious intent, but it's still a foul that needs to be
Yeah.
called because
Yeah.
it
No.
is a foul.
100%. And so what I mean is that if you watch the replay, especially in slow motion, okay, there was a loose ball, and DiVincenzo is clearly going for that loose ball. And if you continue watching, you can clearly see his head tilt as if he was saying like, "Oh crap, I'm about to run into this player. I need to try and
Right.
avoid him." And unfortunately, he didn't avoid him. So I don't think DiVincenzo was looking to hunt in that particular play. But regardless, intention does not matter. That was still a foul. And Ed, I I think I've used this example before in a previous episode, right? But think about it when you're driving and you kill somebody, there's a reason why in most of these cases, unless it's a situation where there was just no way you could avoid the person or whatever, right? There's a
Hmm.
reason why you don't get charged with murder, because the assumption is that you were not looking to kill somebody that day or that night, but you still killed somebody and you need to be held accountable. Well, the same thing here applies for DiVincenzo. As I've said, I don't think he intended to dive toward his legs. It was Josh Hart, right?
Also, Thompson.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah. I don't think he intended to dive toward his legs. Again, I think if you watch the replay, he was clearly trying to go for the loose ball there, and it was just unfortunate what happened. But nevertheless, it was a foul, and the fact that it wasn't called is egregious. And again, intention does not matter. That was a foul.
Oh, I agree with that part, uh, but it's on the referees to make that happen. So there are there is something that I have in mind as an idea, and I'm this is the first time I'm saying this idea out loud. I want to bounce it off of you. What if this whole replay system that the NBA has adopted? What if we give it some legs by making it mainly available in the final minute of every quarter and not through the rest of the gameplay? So that way, if there is something that does need to be handled through replay in the most crucial point of the game, it can be looked at. Also, if a coach says that there needs to be something looked at to see if a foul should have been called, have him call a timeout, much like a challenge flag for the NFL within that final 60 seconds, and say, I need you to take a look at this. Because I think that in and of itself would allow the rest of the game to play out the way that it should, but you do get that finite perfection of the final minute when it matters the most.
I do feel like something like that could potentially speed up NBA games. What do you think of that?
That that is kind of where I'm going with that. It'll
Okay.
speed it up and still get the most crucial plays covered.
Yeah.
Are there crucial plays that happen in the second quarter? Absolutely. But when you're looking at the final result of a 2 point game, you're not looking at what happened with 6 minutes to go in the third. You're looking at what happened in the final 60 seconds of that final quarter. And
Yeah.
that's where it needs to be absolutely right. Not
Because
not in the 44 other minutes of the game.
yeah. Yeah, no, yeah, exactly. And then also, I kind of want to go back to Monty Williams' post game tirade, and I don't, and I think tirade kind of has a negative connotation there, but I don't blame him. I don't blame him at all, right? Because, and as I said before, I don't think DiVincenzo had malicious intent, but Monty Williams isn't going to know that. Like from where he's standing, you think he has time to kind of just overanalyze in those very few seconds? You think he's gonna be like, okay, I can see. Oh, okay, he didn't mean to. It's all good. No, clearly with Monty Williams, emotions are running high. He's the head coach of the worst team in the NBA. His team at that point was on the verge of losing a nail biter against one of the better teams in the NBA. And from his perspective, and I mean, really, from everybody's perspective, except for the encore refs that game, we all saw that it was a foul. So I don't blame Monty one bit for his rant. And I don't know about the said, but did he get fined or not? Because if he got fined, that's total horse crap.
I haven't seen the end result, but in every sport, if you question the refs or the umpires or whoever is officiating the game, there's there's some fine that follows it. And you're absolutely right. Monty Williams is high stress right now, being the coach of possibly the worst basketball team by record in NBA history. His seat is hotter than taking a leak in a volcano. It is horrific. But that's on him. That is on him getting his players ready and playing and putting that team together
Yeah,
to do better than what they are now. Not relying on the refs to make a call so they can get a victory. That
I
is 100% him.
Well, and I do think that brings up an interesting debate point here, Ed, because let's not forget that Monty Williams is also the same guy who coached the Phoenix Suns. And the Phoenix Suns, before Monty came over, they were one of the worst teams in the NBA. And then he comes over, and then they turn around just like that. But what did the Phoenix Suns have? Right? They have one of the best GMs in the league, and it's hard. No matter how good of a coach you are, you're not going to succeed if you don't have a good GM. And I don't know the name of the Pistons GM, but clearly he's not that good, right? So how much of this is really on Monty Williams versus the general manager of the Detroit Pistons?
Well, when you're talking about the the organizational blame, yes, the organization deserves the blame, but also the players deserve blame as well for not putting in what's necessary to make Monty Williams' system work in an NBA and that is scoring at record numbers with a complete lack of defense, just slightly more defense than what you saw in the NBA All Star game. So so having those players not put in the effort of what it takes to make his system come to life, that's on them.
Hmm.
The organizational fault, that's on them. So top from the ownership down to the GM, down to the coach, down to the players, it's been a complete failure of that entire franchise this year. And is it going to cost Monty Williams his job? Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe they give him another shot with different ball club next year because the way the NBA goes right now, everybody's just circling everywhere. So you could make an entire new roster in 1 year. But that would be on the organization to make that happen for him. Or they just cut him loose and say, well, we didn't know what to do. Well, obviously you didn't know what to do. You couldn't put together a roster that meant anything.
Yeah. I mean, imagine how Cade Cunningham feels right now. But yeah, listen, man. Um, even if even if it's not 100% Monty's fault, and I don't think it's 100% Monty's fault. At the end of the day, the buck starts and stops with the head coach.
Uh-huh. He
So
is the go between the front office and the court. He's got to make that work somehow.
yeah, exactly. And listen, by the way, folks, as we're talking, I got to ask you this: have you ever wondered what happened to journalism? You remember when journalism used to be about simply telling the truth and not letting bias seep into your articles, in your your TV coverages and whatnot, right? Remember, it used to be we inform, you decide. Now it's pretty much we decide for you. Well, folks, you guys should check out American Daily Press. American Daily Press is, of course, the organization that we as Total Sports Talk are a part of. American Daily Press, or ADP for short, is essentially a throwback to what good journalism, well, not good journalism, just journalism, period. It's a throwback to what that profession used to be all about. And it seems like the news nowadays, whenever you read headlines, it is so obvious when bias is playing a factor. Well, folks, at ADP, that's not what it's all about. And Ed and I think we're both in agreement here that you check out articles from ADP, you check out stuff from ADP. There is no bias, guys. The people at ADP try to be as fair and objectionable as possible. So forget CNN, forget NBC. Don't rely on those guys. Instead, subscribe to ADP and read actual journalistic content. So, more stuff, Ed. Let's talk about this situation with Ole Miss player Alan Flanagan. We all saw the elbow, and and I'm pretty much beating a dead horse here. I don't think DiVincenzo intended to do any harm. However, Alan Flanagan, when I watched that looked blatant as hell. What do you think?
With both players standing, there's a difference between somebody catching an elbow in the ribs while they're going to the ground going for the ball. And both standing there, Flanagan's coming across the middle of the key and just, the elbow heard round the world. Bam! Straight into the guy's grill. I mean,
Yeah,
how more blatant can you get of a cheap shot on a player that's just standing there getting ready to guard the play? That it was such an egregious act on Flanagan's part. Yes, he got ejected immediately once it was seen what he did. I just don't know if it was enough, and that's really the question mark that we need to get into here. What say you?
well, before we get to that, folks, let me just offer a correction. I meant to say objective, not objectionable in my ad read. Objective, not objectionable. Anyway, you know, I mean, I'm with you, Ed. I was completely shocked that Flanagan didn't get suspended. I mean, how are you going to look at a play like that and not suspend the guy? It's amazing to me. But listen, I also do want to say, because I know it's kind of been floating around like, oh, like Ole Miss is in bed with the SEC. Guys, this is all freaking Miss we're talking about. Okay, this isn't Kentucky or Alabama or whatever. Okay, I don't think this is about Ole Miss being in bed with the refs. I think this is just about the refs just being insanely incompetent. I don't think it's anything more than that. What do you think, Ed?
Well, the refs in this game did the right thing and ejected Flanagan immediately.
Yeah,
It's the administration above the refs on the court that did not do their job and take him out more time, which has led to this whole conspiracy theory of the the SEC being in bed with the referees to just go ahead and let Flanagan keep playing,
yeah,
because the more teams that get into March Madness, the better profile that the SEC gets, the more money the SEC gets. So it becomes all about that portion of it. What I will say is something that I have seen over the years is the acceptance of street basketball and organized basketball. Those are two totally different things. When me and my friends would play basketball growing up, we would play games that were quite physical, and
mm,
it wasn't all legal. It was, you know, pushing, elbow, uh, shoving, doing all these things that were all about how tough are you as a person, not how good a basketball player you were. And that type of mentality I have seen to the nth degree in in a street basketball pickup game and some areas that are all about, are you tougher than me? No, you're not, because I'm tougher than you. That kind of dialogue back and forth. Well, that kind of attitude I see a little more in organized basketball at this point, and it has kind of led itself to an incident like this. An incident like this where if I'm upset with you, I'm going to let you know on court justice, if you will, versus play better, win the game, and then get to put it in your face. This was not that. This is, I am going to show you that I'm better than you, and this is how I'm going to do it. Elbow. And the guy dropped to his knees. He, kind of curled up a little bit because he just got elbowed in the face. What are you going to expect him to do? But it should not be allowed for that kind of attitude to be in organized basketball. The whole point of sports, competition sports, organized sports, is to create teamwork, camaraderie, learn these life skills to be able to handle these things without having to do those terrible acts to make yourself feel better in the moment.
So what you're so what you're essentially saying, if I'm hearing you correctly, is that it's not necessarily about Ole Miss themselves, but it's more about doing whatever it takes to get as many SEC teams as you can into the tournament.
That's a part of it. Yeah,
Okay.
from the organizational aspect of the SEC.
Well, that would certainly lend itself to this idea that I think you have that up top they seem to think that without Flanagan that Ole Miss doesn't make the tournament, and I'm not really sure I agree with that, Ed, because if you look at Ole Miss's stats, they have three other guys that are double digit scorers, and also Flanagan is you know quite literally their worst 3 point shooter, or the worst 3 point shooter of all the guys that are averaging a double digit scoring. So, do you actually think that if Flanagan doesn't play, that Old Miss doesn't make the tournament? Because I don't think I agree with that.
Well, when you're talking about a bubble team, you want to have the bubble team be at full strength for them to have an opportunity to make it. Because what has gotten them to this point has to be the bubble team is those guys that are there, those starters that are there. So if you take away one, you're severely kicking out the leg out from under the table of that starting five, and that just increases the chances that they are not going to do what's necessary as far as scores wise, as far as games wise, to get themselves into the tournament. Because we're coming up on the SEC tournament, basketball tournament, and the further they go into that thing, the better chance they'll have at getting into the NCAA tournament. But if Flanagan's not there, there we don't know what that team's going to look like, and would they have the opportunity to get enough victories in that tournament to make themselves eligible for the big dance.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think you make a great point about how when you are a bubble team, you definitely need everybody healthy, or at least 99% of your roster healthy. But Ed, while we still got some time left to kill, and since we are, talking about the SEC, I want to ask you this: who
Uh-huh.
is who is one SEC team that's been a pleasant surprise that nobody is talking about? What I mean by that is that Florida is essentially a surprise, even though I've talked about before how I don't think they're too much of a surprise if you paid attention to the offseason, what people were saying. And we've also talked about South Carolina being a surprise team. But who is that one team, or maybe there's a couple of teams that are having a surprisingly good season, but essentially nobody's talking about it?
Well, when you're talking about the state of Florida, there is one. There's a team that has been a good surprise, and there's a team that's been a bad surprise.
Hmm.
Florida Gators, they weren't expected to be where they are right now in the top 25 toward the end of the season. But on the
Hmm.
flip side, Miami, that was in the Final Four last year, may not
Yeah.
even make the tournament. That's
Dude,
that.
not
Go
only
ahead.
that, but they're actually in danger of posting a losing record, which it would be the first time since it would be the first time in 5, 6, maybe 7 years, but who's counting? Remember when Oklahoma went to the final Four with Buddy Hield? They were essentially a one-man team that year, and then the next year they went 11-20. I think if Miami ends up with a losing record, they would be the first. They would be the first team since Oklahoma back then to go to the Final Four, but then not even have a winning record, have a losing record the next season. That's bad.
Yeah, and you said Oklahoma.
Yeah, you might need to wash out your mouth now
Yeah,
after
yeah, a
after
little
that.
bit, a little bit. But I give Florida all the credit in the world of grinding out this SEC schedule because SEC has been a bigger surprise for how good it's been than just a single team would would dictate. Because nobody expected Auburn to be this good. Nobody expected Florida to be this good. Alabama, they were kind of piggybacking off of the success that they had last year.
Yeah.
Calipari, who knows what that guy's thinking at any given time. And then
They
you've got Tennessee, that's essentially the class of the conference, but it's still Tennessee. It's still Rick Barnes, and as somebody whose team was coached by Rick Barnes for a decade,
yeah.
I have serious doubts on how far that will take them.
No, for sure. By the way, Kentucky beat Mississippi State 91-89. So good game. And you know what? Hey, hats off to Chris Jans and the job that he's done with the Bulldogs. I think I don't want to say Mississippi State's a lock, but they're damn near close to a attorney lock. Um, and then
We didn't
also,
even mention A&M or South Carolina.
yeah, well, I know before I said that A&M I think is a potential bubble team, but you also said that they have some bad losses, and I think they're near the bottom of the SEC standings. Let me check that real quick. Actually, I'll check later. We don't have time for that. Um,
Yeah, A&M, they have been kind of up and down. They are the roller coaster of the SEC. They
yeah,
could have a really great win and a
right.
really terrible loss. So
Yeah,
it's that back and forth, and it just makes you want to throw up every time you go up and down like that.
I think when it comes to Texas A&M, I think it depends on how well they do in the SEC tournament, because you can't just outright say that they're out of the tournament yet, because they do have a couple really good wins, but they also have some really bad losses as well. And then you mentioned Florida before, and listen, I'm absolutely loving the season that Florida is having, man. But I've had this lingering thought, and listen, I gotta say that I am a little worried. Not Listen, I'm not. I don't expect us to win the championship. I don't expect us to go to the Final Four. If I had to guess, I think the best we can do is I don't know, Sweet 16. But I'm more worried about the long term outlook, and the reason why I say that is because if you if you look at our team this year, Ed, the majority of our contributions is coming from our transfers. I mean, I think it's safe to say that we absolutely killed the transfer portal during the off season, and that's where the majority of our good numbers are coming from. But in my opinion, the reason why that makes me concerned is because I'm wondering, okay, well, is this a formula that head coach Todd Golden can replicate? Or did he just simply catch lightning in a bottle? And it also gives me flashbacks to Coach Mike White, who when he was with us, he was mediocre for the most part. But just like with Todd Golden, he caught lightning in a bottle in his second season. So you can understand why I'm a little worried about the long term outlook here, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just like as a Texas fan, we wind up having coaches come in that'll have a pretty darn good first year, and then that second year is not as good as the first year. Then the third year is not as good as the second year, and it just kind of trails
Are you
off.
are you referencing Shaka Smart?
Little bit, just
Dude,
a little bit.
I thought that was a brilliant hire for you guys at the time. I mean, he took
I did
VCU
too.
to the Final Four, and yeah, like you said, his first year, you guys did really good with him. It's a shame it didn't work out with him.
Yeah, and um, then we had the coach that we got from Texas Tech, Chris Beard,
Yep.
and and we all saw that kind of spiral in flames due to a off court issue. And then
Yeah.
Rodney Terry looked great as our coach last year. Not quite the same when you are the one putting together the roster in this second season. So I have, as much as I enjoyed last season with Rodney Terry, it wasn't his roster that did that. It was Chris Beard's roster. And when you start talking about actually having to control the program, including putting together the team and the coaching staff and everything combined with it, that's where the test of a real life head coach is tested. Is can you do it over the when it is all on your plate, not when somebody else set it up for you. That's
Uh,
where that comes in. And there's plenty of examples, not only in college basketball, there's college football, there's college
yeah.
baseball. There's plenty other places where you see that same thing happen. But that's my example sitting right now as a Texas fan.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head, Ed. I mean, there's a reason why these guys are interim coaches because this is not the roster that they constructed. And we've talked about it several times before. But Michigan, when Jim Harbaugh was suspended and Sharon Moore served as the interim head coach, and people were singing his praises like, yeah, Sharon Moore this, Sharon Moore that. Obviously, he didn't do a bad job, but that was not his team, right? And even with Jim Harbaugh suspended, listen, at the end of the day, Sharon Moore did not recruit those. Well, I'm sure he had a hand in recruiting some of those players. But the point I'm trying to make is that he was not the head guy. He was not the organizational leader. Jim Harbaugh was, and now we're going to see what Michigan is all about with or not Jim Harbaugh, with Sharon Moore as the main guy. And I remember very distinctly what people said about Rodney Terry. You know, people were praising him for the job he did. Obviously he didn't do a bad job, and you do have to give credit to a coach like that whenever he does take over an unfortunate situation. And he did lead Texas all the way to the Elite Eight, and that was you guys lost to Miami in the Elite Eight, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So with the situation he was dealt with, he did do a pretty good job. And listen, Texas might still make the tourney just because they're in the Big 12, and the Big 12 is just absolutely nuts. Let me ask you this, Ed. What is what is the main reason for Texas's so-called decline? Is it injuries? Is it loss of seniors or graduate players from last year? Perhaps it's just as simple as other teams getting better. But what do you think the main reason is?
Uh, Combination of things. They brought in a really good transfer in Abmas from Oral Roberts, who
Mhm.
has been lights out in streaks, kind of like Nick Van Exel when he was at Cincinnati.
As a
It
Florida
was
fan, brother, I am well aware of how good he is. Trust me,
yeah.
if you know what I'm
So
talking about. Yeah.
so he did he's done well there, but there have been a couple of nagging injuries. There had when you look at the landscape around that Texas team, if you are not an elite, and I mean elite basketball team, you are not going to have that same success that you had last year. because when you are looking up at a surprising Iowa State team that's built like a football team on a hard court, when
Mm-hmm.
you look at Houston, which was a power to begin with, but added the ability to recruit like the Big 12, using the Big 12 as a backboard, so to speak, of it. You've got Baylor, which is always good. You've got Texas Tech, which is playing above their weight, which we're playing them tonight. Uh, you've got the big dog of big dogs, Kansas, just waiting out there, just waiting for people to come at them. Come on into Fog Island Fieldhouse. We will destroy you. What is now the number one team in the country looked like a bunch of little kids when they went into Fog Island Fieldhouse and got beat down. That was terrible what happened to them there. And now Houston's the number one team in the country. And these
Yeah.
are the teams that Texas is looking up at. They're not on that same level. And by not being on that same level, they they look two steps down from where they were last year.
Yeah.
So if you're going to try and compare that, the competition around them, I think, is the biggest thing, not necessarily if they're doing a really bad job as a coaching staff, as a program right now.
Well, speaking of Houston, I want to conclude the episode with this, and I want to get your thoughts, Ed. Who do you think, as of right now, if you had to pick one guy for the AP National Coach of the Year, and I'll answer first. In my opinion, it's Kelvin Sampson, and I'm not sure anybody else should even be close. And it's not just because Houston is the number one team in the country. The reason why I think it's Kelvin Sampson is because Houston as a whole has always been good under Sampson, but of course one of the main concerns as well, they weren't in a tough conference. Let's see how they're going to do in the Big 12. Well, so far they have totally dominated the Big 12. They have taken as first year members of the Big 12. They have taken that conference by storm, and it's pretty much for that reason why Kelvin Sampson is my vote for the AP National Coach of the Year. And I'm not really sure if anybody else should be close to him. But what do you think, Ed?
I I tend to agree with you, partly being a Big 12 guy at this point, but uh, I'm going to throw in Dan Hurley in this mix, because
Ooh,
Dan Hurley bringing UConn back from a national championship last year to being one of the more dominant teams in college basketball this year, despite losing their top scorer and part of the force that they had, where they completely destroyed everybody in the tournament last year.
oh yeah,
They came back and had a 2.5 month stretch where they didn't lose a game. That is high level coaching right there, with all the expectation, all the pressure of getting back to where they were last year. That is a hell of a good job of coaching by Dan Hurley right now.
yeah. And one of the biggest signs of how good of a coach you are, man, is your team improving each and every year. And if you look at
Oh yeah,
UConn's seasons under Dan Hurley, quite literally gradually improved year after year after year until it culminated into a national championship. And you know what? Unlike unlike Kevin Ollie, when they were facing violations and the whole thing just ended in a messy divorce, I don't see the Huskies, suffering the same fate as they did under Ollie. As long as they have Hurley, they're not going anywhere.
100%. So to me, those I think those two would be the two that we'll see at the top of the AP Coach of the Year conversation.
Yeah, 100%, man. 100%. Well, folks, thank you so much for tuning into another episode of Total Sports Talk. I'm David Street. That's my co host, Ed Smith. But guys, check out other podcasts from ADP. Check out Guys Night. Check out Bretta Unfiltered coming soon. And check out Quirks of Creation. But we don't just have podcasts, we also have amazing written content as well. You can check it all out on American Daily Press. But until then, guys, we are rounding third and headed for home.